It never crossed my mind that my child would die by suicide. And it never dawned on me that he would jump off a bridge.
If one person completes a suicide, it conveys this kind of social message that, hey, if I'm feeling this kind of pain, maybe this is an okay way to deal with it.
What was the school doing about it? Why does this keep happening?
When I looked at her picture, I said, it just can't be. It just was so unbelievable that this could happen to a person like Madison.
The goal is to make sure that there are meaningful changes so that parents are going to their children's graduations and not to their funerals.
Welcome to this special edition of America Tonight. I'm Lisa Fletcher. Campus suicide. It is the second leading cause of death among college kids in America. Roughly 1,100 kids die by suicide every year, and reports show that thousands more think about it. We are here on the prestigious University of Pennsylvania campus. Brilliant students, gifted athletes, and limitless futures. But in the past 2 years, too many lives have ended tragically. Tonight, we speak with the loved ones who are left behind. They have so many questions and so few answers. We begin with the story of Timothy Hamlet.
All right, so this is Tim's room, Akil's room, you see.
The undeniable love a mother has for her child is no more evident than inside the Hamlet household.
And that's my pumpkin. And that's
Even inside Timothy's bedroom, that today remains mostly untouched.
You know, I can't tell you how many times I've cried in this room and just like broke down. And can't tell you how many times. And I will continue to do that. You know, I have conversations with him in this room. I can't talk about this anymore.
Catherine Hamlet sat down with America Tonight just 5 months after she learned her only child had passed away, with no answers to why he made the unthinkable choice. So, when you were first notified of his disappearance, what was going through your head?
He wasn't answering our texts. So immediately I was looking for him, and we filed a police report right away. It never crossed my mind that my child would die by suicide. And it never dawned on me that he would jump off a bridge. So much so that while we were searching in the Washington Heights area, I remember saying to someone, well, at least we know one thing. We know he didn't jump. The irony of that statement is critically important for other parents because the stereotype of what suicide looks like is not really what it is. I never knew that suicide was the #2 cause of death for college students. I never knew that.
What Catherine did know is that for 2 years, Timothy had been a gifted student athlete at the University of Pennsylvania. He set school records, impressing his coaches and teammates. But in his sophomore year, his behavior started to change.
I may or may not be able to be there. I have a paper, unfortunately, over break, so I'm working.
He was already seeing mental health professionals privately at the request of his parents. But when they learned he had been removed from his beloved track team after missing practices, the concerned parents pulled their son from school to take a leave of absence in September of 2014.
I wish I did know more about it in hindsight because I feel responsible as his mom. You know, as his mother, I think I bear the ultimate responsibility for what happens to my son. Not knowing mental health, not understanding, you know, the changes. I'm not quite sure what they do there, what resources they have available.
The family would celebrate Christmas together. The following day, Timothy left their Teaneck, New Jersey home and never returned. 6 months later, on May 29th this year, police discovered his body in the Hudson River. Timothy had jumped from the George Washington Bridge. His death was ruled a suicide.
So I spent 6 months following his disappearance, talking to his friends, talking to his family, learning about who he was. And I think I just got really intimately connected to the story and really understanding who he is.
David Kahn is a sophomore at UPenn's Wharton School of Business. he covered Timothy's case for the student newspaper. At what point did this really come into focus for you in terms of it being a larger issue?
A lot of it came into focus for me at the end when he was found dead, and I had to kind of reconcile that with 6 months of convincing myself that he was going to be alive, and 6 months of talking to his friends, and 6 months of getting to know this kid, and saying, I really want to meet this guy. He sounds like a lot of fun, but now he lost his life. He died by suicide. What made him make that decision? What was the school doing about it? Why does this keep happening?
The mystery behind what happened to Timothy inspired this 19-year-old to look to his fellow students and his university and ask, how did this tragedy occur? What do you think it is?
That's the toughest question.
Right.
Definitely it has a lot to do with the pressure. There's a lot of academic pressure, there's a lot of social pressure, and for these athletes there's a lot of this athletic pressure. And I think a lot of the time that comes together. And I think when you combine that with a culture that won't acknowledge it, where everyone had to be the perfect star to get into the school, especially at these top universities, they don't want to acknowledge that they're struggling.
From February 2013 to December 2014, there had been 8 suicides at UPenn before Timothy took his own life, becoming number 9. Countless others, Khan says, suffer in silence. There's even a name for it on campus. It's called pen face. Students are struggling, but pretend everything is fine.
They're trying to look like we're above the fray. That's where the phrase pen face comes from.
For it to get to that point where the students all have a name for this, yet the university, as you said, isn't doing enough. It's a bit ironic that it has such prominence, yet so little is being done.
I think because mental health is something that affects everybody, it is almost as if it affects nobody. And I think it's almost as if the university is convinced by our pen faces, that by pretending that everybody's okay and that pretending we're okay, the university can go along with it and they have their own pen face. So I would say that Amy Gutman has a pen face too, our university president, and so does most of our administration. If the students are going to pretend they're okay, the administration is going to pretend things are okay. And they're going to take steps to address this PR problem of people committing suicide, but they're not going to address the underlying causes there.
When you've got a population of 100,000, 7 people are going to die by suicide. It's just what the statistics are.
But I think there needs to be a distinction drawn between saying these are the statistics, we can't do anything about it, and saying these are the statistics, here are tangible things we're going to do about it.
Pen face, part of the truth about campus life that Catherine would discover soon after losing her only child to suicide. But it wasn't the only shocking discovery that Catherine would make. Welcome back to this special edition of America Tonight. I'm Lisa Fletcher here on the University of Pennsylvania campus. Between February 2013 and December 2014, there were 8 suicides before Timothy Hamlet took his own life, becoming number 9. How his grieving mother turned the loss of her only child into an opportunity for change.
But he was off to college, so you know.
Catherine Hamlet lost her only son, Timothy, to suicide just 5 months ago. He was a gifted student and ran track at the University of Pennsylvania.
Right now it feels like hell on earth, but I can tell you and anybody else that I know what heaven feels like, because there has, for me, been nothing more beautiful than to have a child that we created out of love. And to love him and share his earthly presence.
Oh, congratulations.
How do you feel?
And have a family.
You're going.
This is an interview.
A finance major named David Kahn had been reporting on her son's untimely death for UPenn's newspaper. The two formed an unlikely bond when this young student decided to break down the stigma of mental illness, and a grieving mother turned the loss of her only child into change.
The reality is that my son died by suicide. He was a student there, and hopefully he will be the last student at Penn to die by suicide. That's the goal. Let's make Timothy Hamlet the last student at UPenn to die by suicide.
The result of their collaboration? The Hamlet Reed Mental Health Initiative, also signed by Linda Douglas, whose son, Theodoric Reed, died by suicide in August 2014. The initiative is made up of 6 proposals that include a designated counselor for incoming students, the ability to schedule appointments online, and a focus on mental health during new student orientation, things that were not available to Catherine's son.
We have not calmed it down. Like, you would think, these things happen and people forget about them, move on. People have not moved on.
Students delivered the initiative to UPenn President Amy Gutmann via a silent march. They carried posters with the names of UPenn's suicide victims, including Timothy.
I think what was powerful about this specific venue, right, where we're walking is exactly where we walked, is that this is the center of campus. This is the throughway through which everyone passes. The silent march had a lot of power in that these voices are silenced. People aren't speaking. We marched through the center of campus. Everything around us was affected by this issue. Every person we passed by was affected by this issue. But they're all silenced. They aren't talking about it. They can't talk about it. They're not confident enough to talk about it. I think the silence captured that power.
America Tonight repeatedly requested interviews with the university. We reached out to the head of the counseling and psychological services and were told his schedule was, quote, full. As for UPenn's president, we were told, quote, her schedule is booked many weeks, in some cases months, in advance. President Gutmann didn't have time in her schedule to speak with us.
Right, she didn't have time in her schedule to speak with us either. We wrote a letter signed by over 500 people now, including the parents of 2 suicide victims, including the class presidents of every year, including the head of the sorority council, the head of the fraternity council. Basically all the student leaders on campus got together after Timothy was found, and we got together and we said, it's time for change. We're not gonna lay out every single thing you need to do, but we're gonna lay out a framework and we wanna have a conversation about it.
But the University of Pennsylvania isn't alone. 6 students died by suicide at MIT in 14 months. And Cornell received the dubious name of the suicide school when 6 students died during the 2009-2010 academic year. Dr. Greg Eels is the Director of Counseling and Psychological Services at Cornell.
One of the things that you see around suicide is it's a rare event, and it's influenced by contagion and clustering are 2 factors in the research, where if one person completes a suicide in a defined population, it does create some risk for everyone else in that population, because it conveys this kind of social message that, hey, if I'm feeling this kind of pain, maybe this is an okay way to deal with it.
But up to 90% of the college students who die by suicide were not receiving help from college counseling centers, a statistic Catherine is determined to change. Parents that have preceded you in this circumstance, it was a moment in a headline or a moment for the school, and then things sort of get swept under the rug and it's business as usual. What's going to happen in the wake of Timothy's death in that regard?
Well, it's not going to be business as usual. I hope that he is the last suicide at Penn. Our family is devastated. Other families have been devastated. Individually and collectively, we certainly have the intellectual firepower and the resources that we can do better. The goal is to make sure that there are meaningful changes so that parents are going to their children's graduations and not to their funerals.
1 in 10 college students seriously considers suicide. And like Timothy, who was dealing with the stress of academics and athletics, many who have those thoughts won't tell anyone.
And it was Hamlet.
The numbers don't end there. The suicide rate among young adults ages 15 to 24 has tripled since the 1950s. That's an increase of over 200%. It's the 2nd most common cause of death among college students. Dr. Eels has been at Cornell for 13 years. He says it's a balancing act between access to counselors and treatment.
So if we want to try to lower stigma and get in as many people as we get in, that means, if our counselors are doing that, there's less resources to provide ongoing treatment and care. So we're balancing both of those things. And that's an ongoing conversation at every college and university. Like, how many staff members should you have? I mean, people who do this work, they're in it because they want to do it and they find it meaningful. They're not making billions of dollars.
Catherine knew nothing about suicide before her son's death. But she is determined to change that for others to honor his memory.
You became aware of your son's death just 5 months ago. Your composure is stunning. Where do you find the strength?
There is not a day that I don't absolutely cry and just, I miss him terribly. I look back on a conversation that I had with him when he was young. I said to him that, your life can be beautiful without me. I never thought that I would have to try to have it the other way, where I have to try to make a beautiful life without him. There's no reason why there should be anyone else in this situation. It's my son. I have to honor him, and I have to make him proud of me. He's got to be proud of his mama. He's got to be. At least I'm going to try.
When we come back, changing the law in New Jersey. A teacher grieving the loss of yet another UPenn student wants to force colleges to be transparent about student suicides and provide help before they happen. Welcome back to this special edition of America Tonight. I'm Lisa Fletcher. Madison Holleran's life seemed perfect. She was smart, a star athlete, and an Ivy League scholar. Yet she was pained. We continue our special report on campus suicide with a teacher deeply moved by his student's death and convinced that her life offers an important lesson.
So Madison's pictures have taken the place of your family on your Facebook page right now.
Yes, they have. I have my family in front of me. That's all I have left of Madison right now. I can remember her very, very fondly.
Edward Modica taught middle school for 37 years, here at Brookside in northern New Jersey. Over the years, the Holleran children passed through his class, and he got to know the family very well, including Madison. Today, her photos dominate his Facebook page, replacing images of his wife, children, and many grandchildren.
I wanted to make a difference. When I looked at her picture, I said, it just can't be. It just was so unbelievable that this could happen to a person like Madison. When you looked at this child, you saw what looked like a perfect individual. The facade, maybe, I don't know.
Madison Holleran was one of 4 kids growing up here in Allentown, New Jersey. A small, scenic place filled with historic homes and tightly knit families. In high school, Madison was a popular student. She had good grades, was athletic, running track, and playing soccer.
Number 3, Madison Holleran.
When college came calling, she wanted nothing but the best, ultimately deciding on the University of Pennsylvania, where she had a double major and continued to run track and field.
It looked attractive, it looked like a wonderful future. Just get through the 4 years. She could run track, which she also loved to do. And I think that the grandeur of UPenn, Ivy League school, really took Madison's heart in the beginning. And then when she got there, she realized that it wasn't all it was pepped up to be, that there was some difficulties. She couldn't build the same social network that she had here.
Those difficulties turned out to be far worse than anyone would ever suspect. Online, the 19-year-old seemed to be the face of perfection. Her smile filled the screens of her social media. But on January 17th, 2014, everything changed. She posted this photo of Rittenhouse Square in downtown Philadelphia to Instagram. It would be her last. An hour later, Madison jumped from the 9th floor of this downtown parking garage.
There was a point at which she reached out for help. What was she met with from UPenn?
She told them she felt suicidal, and they referred her to a student or an assistant, someone who I don't think was highly qualified to meet her needs at that time. And Madison was not pleased at all with the person. She couldn't relate. There was over a 2-week waiting period for her to see an actual counselor at UPenn. And that's totally inexcusable. When someone is feeling pressured and someone is feeling overwhelmed and someone needs immediate help, You can't tell them to wait over 2 weeks. It just doesn't happen. It's not reality.
Tragically, Madison's story is not the first at UPenn. From February 2013 to December 2014, there had been 9 suicides at this Ivy League school. Across the nation, it is the second most common cause of death among college students. At MIT, 7 students died by suicide from March 2014 to September 2015.
A number of kids said, well, geez, he's a full professor of physics. If he can be depressed, I can be depressed.
And if he can get well?
If he can get well, I can get well.
Professor John Belcher has taught physics at MIT for 44 years. He talks openly with students about feelings of overwhelming pressure and anxiety, and about his own battle with depression.
This is an age where people are very vulnerable. That is one of the reasons I'm very clear about having been depressed and having come back from that. To an 18-year-old, they feel that they're never going to recover. So I think it's important for people who have been through mental health challenges to be very transparent about it, because it normalizes to an 18-year-old that this is something they can live through and thrive.
Stress and feelings of inadequacy among students here is so common, there's a name for it: imposter syndrome.
What do you think of this idea of imposter syndrome?
Well, I used to have imposter syndrome. I did well academically. I went to Caltech. I came to MIT. I got tenure. You look around and everybody presents a very polished face, and you start to think that you're the only one that is struggling, because everybody else seems to be swimming along with no effort. I think that is an issue at MIT because we have such a talented student body.
Presenting a polished face is also an issue at UPenn, except here it's called pen face.
Do you think any of that may have been at play with Madison?
Most definitely. When Madison looked at Facebook and other social media, she saw pictures of happy students. And Madison, in turn, I think posted pictures that showed herself being as very happy and very content. But she wasn't. She was thrust into a group of young adults where being on top didn't come easily to her anymore.
Madison's death has moved this retired teacher so much that he's pushing for a new law.
On January 17th, a former student of mine took her own life. Madison Hollerton was a freshman at UPenn, and she was also an extremely talented runner on UPenn's track team. Her suicide left a void in the hearts of so many people across the United States. I wanted to make colleges accountable for accurately listing the number of suicides and attempted suicides on their campuses annually.
Modica has pulled in thousands of signatures since creating the online petition early last year. He believes that universities need to be part of the solution, and for that to happen, transparency is necessary. His goal is to make it a requirement for colleges to list the number of suicides and attempted suicides on their campuses annually, and provide certified prevention counselors to students, something Madison never had.
I made a promise to Madison. I do pray to her, I talk to her. I tell her that we're going to make things better for the next person who comes up. We're going to make things easier. We're going to make those decisions easier. We're going to try and have the mental health facilities that weren't available for you available for the next person who needs them. Can't bring her back, but we can certainly help to save some of her friends.
Thanks for joining us for this special edition of America Tonight. Tell us what you think at aljazeera.com/America Tonight, and talk to us on Facebook and Twitter. Good night.